Can a man proclaim an unwritten doctrine infallibly? Some people try to say no because, well, look at all the past errors of men. But let's check this out biblically. Firstly, the question is, can heaven be wrong? The answer is no, because we see from Matthew 23 that Jesus says, he who swears by heaven swears by him who sits on the throne, meaning swears by God. And obviously, God cannot be wrong. And so, no, one cannot say that heaven can be wrong. But if so, then in Matthew 16:18 through 19, when Jesus changes Cephas's name and shows that he is the rock and says that whatever he binds on earth shall be bound in heaven, whatever he looses on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And also Matthew 18:18, where Jesus talks to the apostles saying that whatever they loose and bind on earth will be loosed and bound in heaven, that then Jesus is giving infallibility to men. Now, what does binding and loosing mean? One definition is it is the authority to absolve sins. Catechism Catholic Church 553. Second definition is kicking or readmitting a member out of the church. Catechism of the Catholic Church 1445. Or, this is more pertinently, power to make an infallible statement, such as a doctrinal judgment and a disciplinary decision for the church. Catechism Catholic Church 553. Okay, let's defend the third one. Specifically, we have the example in the Council of Jerusalem in Acts 15. The apostles were deciding on whether a Gentile needed to get circumcised to be saved. This was not a written doctrine at the time, so they gathered in this council to get the answer. Basically, Peter speaks the unwritten words infallibly that the Gentile does not need to get circumcised to be saved. Peter just spoke unwritten words infallibly. When he pronounces those words, he is binding what is on earth to heaven. Now, heaven itself is bound to that infallible statement of Peter that basically the Gentile does not need to get circumcised to be saved. Before Peter spoke these words, they were not written. But the moment he spoke those words to them, they were infallible. And then finally, those words were finally written down in the Bible. Another example of men writing or saying things with the Holy Spirit's protection that are without errors is the books of the Bibles themselves. The verses God puts in the Bible are without errors for salvation. When St. Peter wrote 1st and 2nd Peter, these letters were without errors for salvation. This is even though Jesus called Peter Satan, Matthew 16:23, and Peter denied Jesus 3 times. And also in Galatians, Paul rebuked Peter straight to his face. So, men can have failings and yet have the gift of infallibility in another sense. So too with the current popes. They would have moral failings in many ways, but they would have infallibility in another sense. Well, what are the specific conditions for the pope to proclaim a statement infallibly? Number one is when he speaks ex cathedra, meaning from the chair. This is indicative of him proclaiming something infallibly, where it's definitive or he defines something. The word define is very important, according to Bishop Vincent Gasser in his book, The Gift of Infallibility. And he was the relator for Vatican I, meaning he's that guy who gave the bishops the documents so that the bishops can vote on the documents. So he was very crucial in Pastor Atenus concerning infallibility. Basically, look for the word definitive, define, and all the rest. Note, though, that this word is not a magical word, because sometimes, indeed, the Pope is just giving a definition, as in giving a meaning of something. But the other usage of the word define is to put an end to the case. So when the Pope proclaims something ex cathedra, he puts an end to the case. So he says, for example, that divine revelation has shown that Mary is assumed into heaven. He puts an end to that case. Within the Catholic Church, there are no discussions on whether Mary was assumed into heaven or not, because the Pope defined it ex cathedra. The second condition is that he proclaims that statement on faith and morals, not science or history. There's a lot more to be said concerning infallibility and its conditions, but these two conditions are necessary and are the basic ones. Now, what are some early church evidence of papal infallibility? St. Maximus the Confessor shows that the Roman Catholic Church had the power to bind and loose, and thus, obviously, as interpreted earlier, is infallible. He says, quote, supreme dominion, authority, and power over all of God's churches throughout the world to bind and loose, unquote. This supreme dominion and authority and power to bind and loose is what the Roman Catholic Church has. Another piece of evidence is found in the Formula of Hormisdas, 519 AD. Now, here's a context. There's a schism going on in the East, and some Eastern bishops, including the Bishop of Constantinople, went astray. So, to be reconciled to the true church, the Eastern bishops need to sign the formula by Pope Hormisdas. A total of 2,500 bishops signed, including, depending on the estimate, some put as 250, others put as 1,000. So, including about 250 Eastern bishops signed it. Here's what the formula says, and showing infallibility as proven through the language of perfection and being unsullied. Watch this. Quote, following, as we have said before, the Apostolic See, meaning the Roman See, meaning the Roman Catholic Church, in all things and proclaiming all its decisions, we endorse and approve all the letters which Pope St. Leo wrote concerning the Christian religion. Continuing, quote, in the Apostolic See, the Catholic religion has always been kept unsullied. Now pause right there. If it's unsullied, it means that it's infallible, without error. That's unsullied. It's clean. And so I hope I may deserve to be associated with you in the one communion with which the Apostolic See proclaims, in which the whole, true, and perfect, perfection means infallible, security of the Christian religion resides. Now, here's another proof that even the Orthodox Church that rejects papal infallibility have to contend with. At the Third Council of Constantinople, 681 AD, which is the sixth ecumenical council that both the Catholic and the Orthodox churches have to accept, Pope Agatho's letter was read aloud in Greek and Latin and was approved by the Greeks as the voice of Peter. In that letter, Agatho from Rome states, quote, this apostolic church, meaning Roman church, of his has never turned away from the path of truth in any direction of error, whose authority, as that of the prince of all the apostles, the whole Catholic Church and the ecumenical synods have faithfully embraced and followed in all things. Continuing, quote, the apostolic church of Christ has never erred from the path of the apostolic tradition, nor has she been depraved by yielding to heretical innovations. She remains undefiled unto the end, which has been established upon the firm rock of this church of blessed Peter, the prince of the apostles, which by his grace and guardianship remains free from all error. So once again, that language of not having turned in any direction of error, and other churches have followed in all things, and the Roman church having been undefiled and continues so unto the end, shows that the Roman church is infallible.